Do you want to start, Jackie, or do you want me to just dive right in?
You can dive right in.
Excellent. Hello, everybody. My name is Nick Carter. I am a licensed clinical social worker, and I am the coordinator director of the Concern Employee Assistance Program. Metro Y and Atlantic Health and Concern, which is a division of Atlantic Health, have partnered since I think 2009. So try to support the organization in a number of ways. And one of the ways that we do that is to try to come and do trainings of this sort. So today I'd like to talk to you a little bit about some of the things that you're going through at the moment, which is change and uncertainty. And we'll talk a little bit about stress management and resilience. And full disclosure, I have combined probably 3 or 4 different trainings. Um, and so there may be a little bit disjointed in the way it appears or sounds, but I think you'll get the idea that, we're addressing a few different topics within this. I'm going to share my screen in a minute, but I would like to say, if you'd like to interrupt me or ask questions at any point, that's perfectly okay. I'll also make time at the end, but feel free to interrupt, ask questions, comment, whatever you'd like to do. Okay. Let's see if I pick the right one. Uh, are you seeing that? No. Let's see. Are you able to see that?
Yes, we are.
Okay, thank you. And should be just one slide. I have another screen over here that shows a couple slides, but let's see if I can advance this. Come on now. There we go. What I thought we might want to talk about is first to validate the experience that you're going through, because I think there's a great deal of power in acknowledging the very thing that you're going through and what the feelings are that might emerge. I think it has the power because it helps us to know that we're not crazy, we're not alone. And if I'm not feeling these things and then they come up later, well, that makes some sense. And I heard about that, and okay. Um, and again, so I think there's some power in just validating and acknowledging what's going on in terms of you emotionally. But I also would like to develop some of the self-awareness, just becoming more aware of what's going on for yourself and how you show up. I do training on social and emotional intelligence, and oftentimes in that training, I ask people to compare, what do you look like on your best day? And what do you look like on your worst day? And I think, that goes to the self-awareness. How do we show up? And so I'd like to talk a little bit about, things like professionalism and how we show up at work when we're under stress. We're going to start by talking about the changes that are going on, discuss the stages of change, and walk through how it is. Are we a person who by default embrace or resist change? And I think we're all oftentimes get comfortable with our surroundings and our rhythm of life. And then when that change, that equilibrium is thrown off a little bit, we get fearful, we get off our game, and sometimes that can come out in all kinds of stress related ways. So I think we ought to talk about professionalism and how we show up, but we should also talk about, well, how are we taking care of ourselves, and how are you managing stress, and how do you know you're stressed, and what does that look like? So that was what I would like to start with. And I use this provocative picture to ask, how are you doing? And that's not a question necessarily for the public to, for all of you to answer at the moment, but I would like you to think about that. I would like you to reflect upon that. What are the feelings that are coming up for you? This is a time of uncertainty, a time of just, probably fear, as we're going to talk about in a minute, and certainly some discomfort. How does that show up in you? And it might be you're feeling overwhelmed, frazzled, unsettled, anxious, tired, exhausted, bored, stressful, fearful, hopeful, optimistic, excited, right? We go through changes in our life all the time, right? And so, we might have lost a loved one, we might have some problems with our health or the health of a loved one in our life, or a relationship may change. Certainly in this context, a job and our career is being threatened to change in some way. and or we may have a different location in our home, in our housing, so that would be a representative change. And in the workplace, of course, sometimes it's a layoff, a change in supervisor, a mission that the organization is on. When I think about you guys, I came over to the Y last week, I believe it was. Um, I thought about my own career, and I will share with you this story that there was a time where I very much was happy. I was working in the chemical dependency treatment field in a rehab, and I was very happy there. I had a nice rhythm going. I had a private practice. I had these days that I was responsible for working at night for the job, and so on and so forth. And then there came news that there was going to be a leadership reorganization and a person was going to come in and they were going to reconfigure the work schedules for all of the clinicians. And that was certainly going to be threatening to me because it was going to threaten the days that I had dedicated for my private practice, which was an important second source of income. And so I was very fortunate because my supervisor said, Nick, this is going to happen. And I'll just pause there for a minute to make that point because I was in a state of denial and I really thought this is not going to happen. And I was just going to go on about my business and everything would stay the same. And he was really very strongly saying to me, no, it's not. And so if there's another opportunity that you see coming your way, you may wish to take advantage of that. And so I did. And that has landed me in the employee assistance field that I have now spent the last 20, 25 years in. And I am extraordinarily happy with the work that I do. So one could say that that change that was thrust upon me, that I had no control over, did yield for me a new sense of a career, a new life, and a new sense of happiness. And that may be very difficult for you to hear now and to even imagine should this happen in your life. But I think that's one of the things that we should talk about. So to get started, what I like to do is a little bit of an exercise, and this is a silent exercise. You can either do this in real life, or you can just remember these questions and think about this a bit. But think about a time in your life when you have made a change. And again, maybe this change was thrust upon you, or maybe this was a voluntary change that you made. And so my first question is, how did you make that change? And when I say, how did you make that? Think about the emotions that were involved in that change. What got aroused in you? Did that change? Did that shift? What were your feelings in the beginning? Did those feelings change over the course of time? And then what was the outcome of that change? And so for some of you, you might say, well, it didn't yield a great result. And others might say, it really landed me in a great spot and it was a favorable change. But it didn't feel like it in the beginning. I think I want you to reflect upon this because one of the things we'll talk about is resilience. And in resilience, we know that people who have undergone other challenges in their life and overcome them and prevailed nicely, have done very well in terms of meeting and greeting a new change. So it makes us a little stronger when we can remember, yeah, I got through that. I did survive that. I thought I was going to die. I thought this was going to be the end for me in one way or the other. And it turned out not to be. And so that recollection is very helpful as we go forward and try to meet a new change or a new challenge. So when we think about the stages, we know that it's not I'm sorry, it is a dynamic kind of process, is right? It's not a linear process in which we just go from here's what's happening and here's the end of that. But in fact, emotionally speaking, we go through all kinds of different changes. And if you think and liken it to grief, the response that Elizabeth Kubler-Ross wrote about, some of these stages are very much the same. In the beginning, as you heard in my story, there's a lot of denial that came with just shock. I can't believe this is really going to happen. Is this really going to happen? And a lot of fear and anxiety that was born around that. And then there was just kind of a sense of resignation, like a passive resignation, though, like feeling very frustrated and feeling very powerless and, getting into that angry stage of, why is this happening? And this notion of change is fast. Yes, sometimes these things, when they get put into motion, do happen rather fast. And so our emotions get stirred up and we really can't even catch up at that point. But for the most part, by and large, there is this next phase in which we begin to accept this is going to happen, this is happening, and now I begin to start doing some exploration. Um, I take stock of this loss in my life, the grief, the sadness, the sentiment, the looking back, the honoring the past. And now this is giving way to what is the future going to look like? What am I going to do? What is my rhythm going to be? What is my new equilibrium going to look like? And then we start getting into a more proactive phase in which we are actually committing to this change. We have some enthusiasm. We begin to trust, maybe not the outside world as much as ourselves. Trust in ourselves helps us to deal with uncertainty. We have been here before and I have prevailed and I can do that again. And with that, I begin to start to transition in a more positive way. But make no mistake about it, some of the feelings that you probably are having at this point have to do with the sense of my security is really shaken. My sense of who I am, my purpose in life, my purpose in my career has really been shaken. And all of those relationships that I've worked so hard to cultivate at work are now being threatened, right? And so a new rhythm, a new way of living, a new familiarity, a new equilibrium is certainly being called into question. And this whole business of, do I have any control over my life? This is being thrust upon me. What can I do? Am I a passive bystander who's just going to watch this? Or can I be an active participant in what's going to happen next? So it really shakes up our whole sense of control, right? And for some of you, your default in life may have been to be a negative resistor. I don't want this change to occur. I like familiarity. I like the way the status quo is, and I do not want that to change. And I'm going to dig my heels in and I am going to go kicking and screaming. And maybe there is some of that in all of you in the beginning, and then that may yield to a more positive and embracing kind of commitment to the change, to the positive. And how might that resistance show up? Because in work, it shows up in a lot of different ways, right? First of all, emotionally and personally, it kind of shakes our identity. Where am I? What do I do? Who am I? What is my role? Um, what do I offer anymore? Is this an indictment about my work and my being? Do I need to redefine myself? And then that sense of being disengaged, like I'm looking down from above onto this as if it's not real and it's happening to somebody else, sort of that detachment from my own emotional state. And then that anger piece that has to do with resisting change and being disenchanted. This is dumb. How could they do this to me? How could anybody, think that this is a good idea? And so on and so forth. And again, all these forms of resistance. It certainly can show up as a negativity and sort of being a toxic, cynical individual, bad mouthing others, expressing our anger out loud. You know how in the work world we are fairly careful, I should hope, in terms of reining in our emotional responses to things. We are thinking about being appropriate, being a leader, being, a good employee, a good team member. And so we rein that in. And sometimes when there's a change that's being thrust upon us that we feel like we have no control over, we let that go. We give into, you know what? They don't care about me, so why should I watch my tongue? Why should I watch my behavior? And we get into this cynical view of life. And maybe we avoid things that, meetings or participating actively in planning. Um, certainly in the change that you guys are contemplating that may or may not occur, you have a whole community that you're having to concern yourself with. And so if we get into that mindset of this is just about me, we lose sight of, well, it's also about a lot of other people too. And so I do need to show up. I do need to participate. But staying with the negative for just another second, sometimes we, sabotage the whole situation by saying, I don't care anymore. And I'm just not going to be that person that I have been all along. Well, what's the opposite of that? The opposite of that is, caught up in a lot of these quotes. I have a few more too, but um, when we embrace change, we think about change being an opportunity. And in another slide, I'll talk about the growth mindset, meaning that there's sometimes good that can come out of change. The benefits of being optimistic and thinking positively about the future is captured here by Viktor Frankl. Man is affected not by his circumstances, but rather the view that he takes of them. Again, he's speaking to the power that we can hold within ourselves in terms of how we choose to interpret data and how we choose to behave and talk around that. And this author talks about resilience. Life's best survivors are better than most people at quickly turning a disruptive event or an adversity into a desirable development. And in a moment, I want to talk to you about a psychologist who really teaches us about resilience. But let's again honor the uncertainty, right? And that's what this slide was intended to do. We're all wondering what the future will look like. This slide came from, no surprise to you, I'm sure, the COVID years. And so we were certainly struggling with a lot of uncertainty in our life. And that was not that long ago, right? Um, and so we are aware that it creates stress and anxiety, and that this is pretty much universal across people, that we're not the only ones, that our coworker right there or the member of the Y is experiencing some of the similar stress and anxiety that you may be feeling. But again, we don't want to give away the power because we do have a lot of power. We have power to interpret the data. We have power to be able to influence and make changes in our life. And that occurs when we have some acceptance that this is our reality. I need to embrace it. It will happen with or without me embracing it. But if I can accept this and embrace it, that itself will be empowering. And it will give me the permission to move forward and make good choices about myself. Doesn't mean that you accept everything. Doesn't mean that you like everything that's going on and the way it was handled or the way it's going down. Um, but it does mean that if I accept this and I participate in this, I can exert some control over my future. And I certainly can take honor and pride in the way I have behaved through this very difficult and challenging time. Here are a couple of more quotes. The secret of change is to focus all of your energy, not on fighting the old, but on building the new. And don't we see that all the time in our children or our clients or our members or whatever it might be that, you go spend a lot of energy resisting and resisting and resisting. And in fact, it's going to happen. And when it happens, you say, wow, I'm exhausted. I've got nothing left to go forward. And so maybe the sooner that you can embrace the idea that this could happen, this will happen, and accept that, and that will allow you the energy to be able to go forward and make things happen in a positive way. A change in behavior begins with a change in heart, this person says. I saw a TED talk that I really thought was a good one, a TEDx talk actually. And I don't know this person who was speaking, but she apparently is from the Harvard School of Business, and she was talking to a group of business students. But I love the way she captured this. It's kind of clever the way she wrote it, but she says, here are the things that I think you need to do to advance your team. Now, if you're not a leader who supervises and influences others, it still applies to you. I have put this up on my bulletin board because I like it for myself. We need to show up. We need to be present. We need to just get our body in the right place at the right time. We need to speak up. We need to participate in life. We need to have our voice heard. And sometimes I can be in a meeting and I get very quiet and I'm listening to others and I forget that I have something to say too that might influence or change another person's outlook or their own thought process. So I need to own that and I need to do something with that. We need to team up. We need to have the ability to be able to seek support from others, to coordinate with others, to collaborate with others, because we are much stronger as a group than we are as an individual. So we need to team up. We need to look up. Look up, in this case, she meant being optimistic, being positive, look forward, not looking back, not looking in sorrow, but rather looking up in optimism and saying, there are a lot of possibilities. There is a lot of good out there. Here's what we can do. That forward thinking, that's rather exciting. And then she talked about the persistence captured in never give up. In times of challenge, in times of struggle and adversities, the power and the ability to be able to keep at it and keep at it and keep at it, quite amazing. And if we were able to do that, we don't give up, we can oftentimes realize our dreams. And then lift others up. Do we have the responsibility just for ourselves, or are we a social animal who also has a responsibility for our friend, our colleague, our coworker, our member, our leader, our supervisor, our subordinates? Do we have some responsibility? I have the luxury of having some very good high school friends that I'm still in contact with, and a couple of them were co-captains on their football and baseball teams. And I look at the qualities that they exhibit in just talking to them, and I realize that they do some of these things. They lift others up. They make other people around them better because of their optimism, because of their energy, because of their hopefulness. And so I love this idea that this professor shows: show up, speak up, team up, look up, never give up, and lift others up. I hope that's meaningful for you too. Now we know about the serenity prayer, those things that we can control versus those things we can't. Let go of the things you can't change and focus on the things you can. Brilliant. That was Niebuhr, a philosopher, and of course it's adopted by the AA community, Alcoholics Anonymous community, and it's called the Serenity Prayer. I put this slide in here because I do talk to different work groups and I talk to them about, well, what does it look like to be professional? And we usually get a variety of different comments that have to do with, well, we have to show up, we have to be on time, we have to be where we're supposed to be when we're supposed to be there. But we also have a responsibility for having a fairly good attitude and not being a toxic employee, right? Not being a negative Nelly that's always bringing other people around us down. We obviously have to adhere to our dress code. We have to mind our words. We can't swear. We don't want to gossip and think about other people, talk about other people rather. But maybe we do have, as a professional, the responsibility to try to stay positive, right? And I know that's so difficult. This blending between being stressed out and living in an uncertain time. And then Nick is coming on the scene and saying, can we be professional? And what would that look like? I mean, really? Come on, man. But seriously, I think we do have it, owe it to ourselves as well as to other people to try to remain positive. And, we have to take accountability for our behavior, whether it's a mistake, and be honest about it and forthright about it. Can we be a person who has a difference of opinion and have that difference of opinion being heard by being professional in the way we communicate it? And of course, we want to be honest and transparent, and we want to keep it professional. I'm not sure how I meant that. Keep it professionally personal. I think that doesn't make sense exactly now that I read it. So I'm really wanting to focus on this intersection of workplace behavior and then taking care of yourself, because it occurs to me that, again, best day versus worst day, how do you show up when you're under a lot of stress? And make no mistake about it, this period of time that you're going through is very stressful, a lot of uncertainty. And so, what do you do to take care of yourself? I want you to reflect upon what are your default stress busters. Are you a person who exercises? Are you a person who listens to music? Are you a person who taps into your spiritual side, maybe through meditation, mindfulness, or contacting a spiritual leader, or a community, a church, or a group of folks? Do you talk to your family? Do you talk to your colleagues? Um, so, the first part of knowing what to do is to knowing, yes, I am stressed out, and here's how it's showing up. I don't feel as motivated. I feel tired. I feel overwhelmed. I feel sad or depressed. It is affecting my sleep. It's affecting the way I concentrate. So know that. This again is about self-awareness. Know that about yourself. This is how it's showing up. And then I can begin to do something about that. We're going to talk about, well, what you might want to do about that. I'll tell you a little bit about this guy, Dr. Seligman. I told this to a few other people last week. But he's an interesting psychologist who did a lot of research on things like helplessness and depression, what have you. And he got very involved and interested in optimism and resilience. And he said, why is it that some people who have gone through a tremendous adversity, let's say you were raised in a family with a lot of dysfunction and neglect, how come it is that some people don't do very well at all? They succumb to it, they become overwhelmed, they have a lifelong history of just trauma and depression, and they don't do well. And he said it's a bell curve. You got about, this little bit on this end of the tail of that bell curve who don't do too well. And then you have the majority of folks who survive it and they get through it. He goes, but I'm interested mostly in those people on this end of the bell curve, the little tail on this end of people who actually not only survive it, but thrive. And so, as you can see in the reference here, he titled his book Flourish. He said some people meet adversity and go through something very horrific, and they do extremely well. Why is that? And so he began thinking about and talking about and researching resilience, what makes some people more resilient than others. And there were some qualities and traits. And he says, I think I've boiled it down to 5 things. And before I tell you what those 5 things, which of course are all spelled out in the slide, I will tell you that the US Army said, we have a lot of soldiers that are coming back from war and are showing all kinds of signs and symptoms of PTSD, depression, and suicidal ideation. Um, what can we do about them? Can we make our soldiers more resilient? And how would we do that? And Seligman says, yes, of course you can. This is something that can be taught. We can learn these skills. And he said, well, the general says to him, well, how are we going to do that? And, Seligman says, well, you need to have a lot of teaching. Do you have any teachers? He goes, yeah, we call them sergeants. And that's exactly what they do. And so he said, we can roll this out. And that's what they did. So Seligman partnered with the US Army and they rolled out this resiliency training called PERMA. And basically, these are the 5 components of it. And he said, this is what's important for us to be able to meet challenges in a very resourceful and resilient way. He started with the idea of the power of positivity, the P being positive emotion. They're an essential part of our well-being, and happy people look back on the past with gladness, look into the future with hope, and enjoy and cherish the present. I had a grandmother who the family used to seem to tease that she saw the world through rose-colored glasses. And I thought that was a derogatory statement. But then later in life, I came to learn how powerfully positive that was, that she chose deliberately to see the good in a lot of things. And I will tell you that from a mental health point of view, we know that in the hospital world, people who have positive optimism fare a lot better, have fewer medical claims and fewer mental health claims. So it's it kind of bears out to be true that this is a very powerful thing, and we can train ourselves to be more optimistic. We can say, yes, our personality is such that I choose to look on the negative, but we can challenge that and we can counter that and take a look at, I can interpret the same data in a different way, maybe a more positive way. And then he talked about E for engagement, that when we focus on doing the things we truly enjoy and care about, we begin to engage completely in the present moment and enter the state of being known as flow. And I know you all know that. You know, that happens sometimes in music when you get lost in music, or you get lost in a book, or you get lost in your work. And all of a sudden, your workday just went by like that because we were in that flow, because we were fully engaged. And sometimes when we're stressed, we get very distracted by our stress, our anxiety, and our worry. So, one of the pieces of resilience has to do with getting ourselves back into an engaged flow state. How can I get back into what I'm doing? The mindfulness meditation movement helps us to do that in just breathing exercises. And then he talked about the power of relationships, you know, the notion that we are a social animal, that we do need other people in our lives, and that that connectedness and that sense of a power that's greater than us or a community that's greater than us is so incredibly important. We enhance our well-being and share it with others by building strong relationships and people around us. And that's why some of the changes that you're maybe embrace at this moment are difficult because we built relationships with our coworkers, with our members, and you know we look back upon them so favorably, and it's sad to let them go. But we can build new ones, and we need to do that. Boy, we saw the power during the COVID of just that, right? That you know we didn't have work to go to for some of us, and or we worked virtually and we no longer had that social connection, so we had to find ways to do that. You know, that high school group of friends that I was telling you about, there's 6 of us and we live in different parts of the country, and it was during COVID that we started having regular weekly Zoom meetings, and we have continued to do that because we like that connection, that sense of relationship and connectedness with other people. Then he talked about M, meaning for meaning. So we are at our best when we dedicate time to something greater than ourselves. You'll be surprised to hear that sometimes my clients will come to me and they'll say, I am very stressed out. I have this going on, this going on. I have so many things. I feel very overwhelmed. And then I tell them, have you considered volunteering some of your time? And they said, Nick, you didn't hear me. I just told you I'm overwhelmed. I have too many things to do. And I will say, but you find when you volunteer your time or you get involved with some kind of charity or Habitat for Humanity or some spiritual community or whatever the endeavor might be, that is greater than yourself, it lifts you up. It gives you a greater perspective about your life, that there are other people out there that are struggling, that have much more difficult things to challenge them in their life. And it helps you to feel like I am a part of something that's greater than myself. And then finally, he did acknowledge that the resilient people, the people with more ability to manage an adversity, are people who have a sense of accomplishment. And I think sometimes we lose sight of that. I would like you to reflect upon the difference that you make in other people's lives. Because sometimes we look for our supervisor or our leaders to tell us, hey, you're doing a great job, Nick. But that may not come. I think it's important for us to be able to take stock of, maybe make a list of, maybe make our own little happiness document about here's what I did today, and it seemed to influence or affect other people in a positive way. That's an achievement, and that's an accomplishment that we can be proud of. And we need to really remember that because there's going to be some days that it's pretty negative and some bad things have been happening. We also need to take stock, maybe take that list out of our pocket and look at that and say, you know what? I did that and I did it well. So this is Seligman's view of PERMA, which is a map for resilience. And he also talked about the habits of resilient optimists are people who don't give up I'm sorry, who don't give up, who don't give up and have a habit of interpreting the setback or the challenge in their life as temporary, that this is going to change, it will go away, that it is local, it is not absolutely all over the place. This is always why me, Lord, and this is Charlie Brown, and geez, I'm a victim, and this always, it's not like that. This is local and specific to this time and this situation. And this is changeable. I can do something about it. Again, oftentimes changes are thrust upon us from outside, and we feel like we have no power and control, and there are certain things we will not have control over, but there are certain things that we do. So when we talk about managing stress, I put together a list of 10 things that I think are helpful. I think the first one has to do with what kind of data are we getting in from the outside world? Is it accurate? Or are we running on things that are just not true? Fake news, gossip, um, and that stirs us up all the time. There's, oftentimes there's somebody who would love to pass on a message that may not even be accurate, and it gets us all churned up and for what? So make sure that if you're responding with anxiety and worry or stress, that you're responding to something that is real. We already talked about the difference between understanding what we can control and what we can't, but making sure that we don't give up on the things that we can control. I think at the top of the list for most stress reduction techniques and strategies often is getting your body under control through good exercise, through good sleep hygiene, eating habits, and so on and so forth. By exhibiting behavior that's positive behavior going forward, seeking out opportunities, looking for new things, new ways to be. For managing our emotions, in terms of acknowledging, yes, I'm feeling stress. Yes, I'm frustrated. Yes, I'm angry. Knowing what it is, knowing how it shows up, and then managing our thinking. And I call it stinking thinking. Sometimes we get into interpreting the data in a very negative way. We have the ability to change that, as we spoke before, to a positive and optimistic way. When we get stressed, one of the best things that we can do is slow down and take a deep breath. A deep diaphragmatic breath. This is the stop technique that came from the mindfulness movement, and it just takes a second. We stop what we're doing, we take a deep diaphragmatic slow breath, and we observe our surroundings or even what our body is doing, and then we proceed and go back to what we were doing. The stop technique can be done in a split second. A more lengthy kind of meditation or breathing exercise is called the box breathing or square breathing, in which you envision a rectangle and break down the breathing into 4 sides, if you will, each side representing the amount of time that you're going to take for the inhale, the rest, the exhale, and the rest again. The rest, you're not doing anything, you're not inhaling, you're not exhaling. And trying to make each of those sides approximately 4 seconds long, and slowing down as you do it. So that can be extremely helpful. We already talked about, trying to be sure that you're mindful about your eating habits. Are you gravitating to junk food? Are you taking care of your body? Are you staying healthy? Are you hydrating? Getting that exercise, taking a walk doesn't have to be a huge workout, but it's certainly, and as you guys all know at the Y and teaching classes and camp and your members, exercise is so powerful, not only for the body, but also for the mind. And then keeping things in perspective. In the big scheme of things, will I survive this? What will my life look like? I think I can manage this. I do have some things that I can be very grateful for at the moment and in the future. So, and then we talked about the power of connecting with other people, just as Seligman talks about. Use your resources, talk to your friends, reach out to your colleagues, your coworkers, lift them up, and that'll make you feel better as well. And then find a way that you can simplify your life. What do I need to take care of? What's my priority? What do I need to worry and focus on right now? I can put this off into the future. I can do this later. And then get help. Ask for help. You're struggling. One of the benefits you have is this employee assistance program. So come and ask for help. Reach out. So we want to blend this thing called professionalism and this self-care that we just talked about together, right? How do we do that? What I'd like you to do is think about things like what led you into the kind of work that you're doing presently? What was it like when you first got this job? How did you make this career choice? How has that changed through the years? How are you feeling about your career now? And do you have this growth mindset versus a fixed mindset? The fixed mindset really suggests that we are who we are and we are that way now. And that's the end of it. And there's no more work to be done. The growth mindset says there are opportunities to be had out there. I can broaden my career, or I can change my career. I told some of you already the same story, but in my career, I went to college for psychology, and I took a number of courses during the summer and the January semesters, and I think I burned myself right out. Instead of going to graduate school right away, I didn't know what I was going to do. I didn't have a job. I came back home and I looked up the job that I had in high school, which was in a supermarket. And my boss said, "Well, while you're trying to figure out your life, you want to learn a trade?" I said, "Yeah." And he taught me to become a butcher. I was an apprentice butcher, a journeyman butcher, and later became a meat manager in King's Supermarket for about 13 different stores. Um, I certainly got tired of that after a while. And I said, this is not the profession that I want to retire in because it's very difficult to grow old in this business. And I missed the psychology part. And I went back to graduate school and ultimately got back into this field that I really love. But I think it taught me that we are more than one thing. We have a lot of skills, a lot of talent that we can utilize in different functions. And some of the skills that you've honed in this career, in this profession, in this job, can be also applied to other areas as well. And then, what mentors do you have in your life? Do you have people that you look up to that you could really tap into to find out, um, how do they stay motivated and how do they take care of themselves and how do they grow in their life and their career? I had made mention of that happy document as one of those ways that we take care of ourselves. And again, these two bullet points really speak to making sure that you're giving yourself the full due that you deserve. What do I do well? What have I done well? And take stock of that and applaud yourself. Again, we often look for outside praise, and that's great. But how about giving that to yourself as well? And then maybe surround yourself with things that lift you up, whether it's positive music, whether it's turning off the news, which is pretty depressing these days, and controlling your environment, controlling the input and the stimulus that's in your environment, maybe reading inspirational quotes, um, and managing that part of your brain that's talking about negative things and saying, you know what, I can look at the things I'm grateful for, and I can change the way I'm thinking about life very with a little effort. I was going to say very easily, but it's not that easy. I mean, it takes some deliberation and some intention for sure. And this little technique, I think, is very helpful. Think about your day overall. What impacted you today? How did it impact you? And what do you need now to help make it okay? What meaningful moments can you savor? Each day has its own, choices or is chock full of different things that have happened to you and the way you've influenced other people. Can I take stock of that? Can I reflect upon that? And can I think in terms of, okay, what impact have other things and people around me made on me? And what impact am I making around on them? And so to wrap up, again, this is coming from the mindfulness guru, John Kabat-Zinn. You can't stop the waves, but you can learn how to surf. So these changes may be thrust upon you. What can you do with that? And then finally, how do you want to start and end your day? We have the ability to be able to be very prideful in the legacy that we leave behind, in the way we have behaved. Did I conduct myself in a way that was professional, that was courteous, that was kind, that was compassionate to others, that was passionate and energized and motivated about my world? Yep, I'm going through some adversity. Yep, there's no denying that there's fear involved in my heart. But how do I want to show up? How do I want that to look? Can I look back on my time here and say, you know what? I'm proud in the way I managed that. And I hopefully influenced other people as I modeled that. So how do I show up? I'm going to stop there and remind you that you have this benefit. This is counseling, confidential counseling, available to you by calling this number. And you're entitled to 1 to 3 sessions at no cost to you whatsoever. And with that, I'll stop sharing. And I will take any questions, comments, or responses that you might have.